Hello and welcome to EatSure presents the RCB podcast.
The fine print was that I would need to stay the days to, because they pay the fines for Kolpak players back then. So you need to do the days, which is 184 days a season there. And then I could go back and play for South Africa. But that meant I was only available for 2/3 of the season back in South Africa.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's half the year in one country and half in another.
yeah, that wasn't going to be allowed. Well, it was going to be allowed if I wanted to, but they won't say, yes, you can do that and still play for the Titans. So at the time, I was earning, minimum wage is calling it, is over-exaggerating back then because contracts then was extremely low. So I think it's about $2,000 a year.
Right.
That's what I was earning in my first year then.
And did they give you a place to stay?
No, this was now South Africa, right?
Okay, so this you had home.
I was at home, but the contract I got in England was £45,000.
It's a lot more.
So it's a lot more. And as a young kid, I was going, whoa, this is good money. Like, this is what I've been, this is what professional cricket is all about. The money did play a role in the decision making, but obviously from an action perspective, it wasn't what made me, because my desire to play for South Africa is just too big to give it up.
Hello and welcome to the RCB podcast. My name is Danish and this is season 2, where we're discussing game-changing moments. And with me is the captain of RCB, Faf du Plessis. Faf, hi and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. You sound very formal when you introduce yourself, Danish. It's like this spiritual human being somewhere living in the mountains.
I feel like a therapist right now.
It's supposed to have a lot of wisdom, and you do. So thank you for having me on the show.
In Arabic, my name actually means wisdom.
Really?
It does. My mum was a smart person.
Well, the name meets the face.
It does?
Yeah.
What does Faf mean?
It actually doesn't have a meaning because my real name is Francois.
What does Francois mean?
I don't know. It sounds French, which makes it sound a lot cooler. I like the French language. I wish I could speak it.
You don't?
No. But it does have a French Francois.
Francois.
Yeah.
So how did Faf happen then?
Faf, my dad was also Francois.
Okay.
And I think it became a nickname for him. And then how that changed was he was Big Faf, and then the people would just call me Small Faf. And initially, the name didn't stick as much with him, but everyone was calling me Small Faf, Small Faf, Small Faf. And then I became recognized by that name. And then I remember in high school, people started reporting Faf rather than Francois. And I quite liked that. I quite liked that it was unique. There's a lot of Francois in South Africa, but there wasn't a lot of Fafs. So I was like, sounds like it's one of a kind, one of one. So I never corrected anyone when they started. So it just ran its course as a nickname. And obviously here we are today. And not a lot of people, or a few people know that my name is Francois.
It's 3 alphabets, but it's a huge name in the cricketing world, isn't it?
But people know this. So I quite like that it's unique. And then till about 2-3 years ago, another Faf came into the equation. He was a rugby player that played for the Springboks. So now there's 2 that are supposed to be recognized Fafs out there. So I'm assuming there will be more to come now in the future.
So there were 2 other Fafs, or rather one Faf and your brother who played rugby as well. And you had the choice to play rugby as well, but you chose cricket. Is that right?
So my Yeah, my family was divorced when I was 3.
Right.
So on my dad's side, I've got a stepbrother.
Right.
And on my mom's side, I've got, I never know what these things are actually called, but I think it's half sisters.
Yeah.
And yeah, still close to them till this day. But my stepbrother is the brains more than the sport. So he did sports as a hobby, but he was always he had a lot of brains. So mathematically, CA, business oriented. So he didn't play, but my dad was a professional rugby player when he played.
Yeah.
But back then, rugby or cricket or anything wasn't really a profession. So my dad was a teacher and a part-time professional rugby player, but they didn't really get paid. So,
Yeah.
And then I got born, and then I think I was about 1 or something. The story was told that I was sitting there in the night with the lady that was helping, looking after me.
Yeah.
And my dad was like it's 9 o'clock in the evening and there's like a baby sitting and like, what am I actually doing here? There's no point. I'm not getting paid. So he just stopped playing rugby and just became a full-time teacher. Obviously, that was financially, I mean, a teacher's don't
More rewarding.
paid well, but it was more rewarding for the time that he was putting into it. Yeah, so, and then he basically, still at a very young age, retired from the sport of rugby. And then I think initially when I was growing up, he almost wanted to relive his profession, which was rugby. So he pushed me quite hard for rugby.
Right.
But I was never as good at that as I was at cricket. Cricket was just naturally the talent that was there. Rugby was something that was forced.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm glad that happened quickly.
Do you resent the game because of this?
No, I don't resent the game. I use rugby mostly as a fitness tool.
Right.
For cricket season. Even other sports was just a case of just being busy, doing as much as you can, because in I don't know what it's like in India, but you have terms where you play the sport cricket. So you don't play it all year round.
Yeah. In India, you play it all year round. If you can't play it outside, you start playing with like bottles of Pepsi and Coke and.
So you go all year round and indoor and outdoor, and when you're sleeping, and yeah, I get that. But in South Africa, it's not like that. The serious sporting schools play it for about 60-70% of the year, but the other schools only play it for 30% of the year, cricket. So I had to do other sports just to keep me fit. But I remember when I was 17,
Yeah.
I was like, this rugby thing really doesn't, I mean, I don't want to even do it for fitness anymore. I just want to focus on cricket. So I was like, guys, I'm not playing. I'm retiring from rugby.
At 17.
At 17. And they were like, okay, cool. But then there was about a month later, there was this casual game that all my mates was playing. They were like, just come and play one more game. It'll be fun. We're playing against another school's first team. So we'll just put out like a third or fourth team, but it's more a social game. So I was like, okay, cool, that sounds fun.
Yeah.
The reason why I retired I'm using the word retired, but why I stopped playing rugby was I don't want to get injured. Because our cricket season was around, I was using my last year in school to set myself up post-school for it to become a profession.
Right.
So I played in that game, and the guy tackled me and lifted me up, and he like dunked me over his shoulder, and I fell backwards, and I broke this wrist.
Ouch.
So my dad was big on never showing pain. Like that was a big thing for him. So there was an incident before that when I was about 12 playing rugby, and the guy took me by the jersey and slingshotted me and then slammed me on the ground.
Yeah.
And I broke this collarbone. And I was obviously crying because I'm a little...
Rugby is rough.
Rugby is rough. And my dad was the teacher at the school who was coaching that side as well. And he was like, stop crying, get on with it, there's nothing wrong with you. So I was like picking my arm up, running around, and then when in rugby, they pass the ball to you and the fly-off can drop goal for points. And I wanted to catch the ball, but my arm was so badly broken that I just like dropped the ball. And then I just collapsed and went to hospital, and my whole thing was broken. But then the same thing with this, I broke it, and I was like, it feels all right. Let me just finish the game. But by the time I finished the game, it was like massively swollen. So the next day, I went into the doctor's office, and he was like, your wrist is very badly broken. You're going to have to get a screw, 2 screws inserted into your wrist. So I ended up missing 3 months because of injury, because of this one
Right.
stupid game that I never wanted to play, missing half of the cricket season. So that was
I thought it was friendly, but
it was supposed to be, but nothing in rugby
doesn't seem like it.
because you want to tackle each other as hard as you can. So that was quite hard for me, and I think that was the first step to like start dealing with the injury side of the sport.
Right.
Because then I was missing games and I was frustrated because like you feel you need to play because the next year is going to be, you want to become a pro.
Yeah.
So you need to do everything you can. But you know, obviously missed that, but then luckily came back for most of the rest of the season to play with my wrist completely fine. I've still got the screws in today.
Even now?
Even now, yeah, they're still there. And I did really well that season. And luckily the following year when I finished school, I got offered a professional contract from the city that I lived in, which is still the Titans today, which is the city of Pretoria.
Faf, you've played so many innings, you've played so many games. Any game that stands out for you personally?
I think the game's always that when people ask me this question.
Like
now,
one game, if I had to like put it
yeah,
on the
so
spot.
I'm just the context of it. I always think of not necessarily my best innings, but my best innings for what the team needed.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
So I don't have one specific one because they all have different specific ones. Yeah. So the debut test, obviously, 100 on debut, it saved the test match.
Yeah.
Then there was Australia when I thought at that stage very unfairly criticised for shining the ball
Yeah.
with a sweep, and the media absolutely ripped into me. You know, Australian media can be quite aggressive. So they labelled me as this cheat and attacked my character before the third test, where it was just like everything, every newspaper was just Faf du Plessis cheat or whatever. So it was just bad. And I walked out to bat at Adelaide for the first pink ball test, and there was 50,000 boos as I walked out, like as loud as you can get. So, and then once again, I was just like, this is my character, this is what I was born for, like, this is my character, this is the fighter in me. And then to get 100 in that test match, yeah, it was once again one of those moments. Even when I got to 50, everyone booed me. It's only when I got to 100 that half of the stadium clapped and half still booed.
So it was a split room basically.
More than split. Yeah, it was, but it lit a flame within inside of me to like, you're not going to get me out today because of what's happening out there. So moments like that is where I really, there was 100 I scored against Australia in the fourth test with a very badly broken finger.
Yeah.
Batting with a broken finger to the point where I was out for 6 weeks after that. But to score 100 with a broken finger, those are the things that is my most memorable.
But that's not the first time you finished a game injured.
Oh, there's been a few.
Going back to your rugby story again. We saw that when you were 28 and when you made your test debut, it was against Australia, and you got 100 in the second innings. That was a really tough situation, but you stuck it out there. What was that like, Faf?
It was long. I batted for the longest time I've ever batted in my career.
Yeah.
Before then, I think it was probably half the amount of balls that I've ever batted in my life.
Yeah.
So that was just sheer mental, what's the word?
Fortitude?
Fortitude, that's the right word. And drive to live out a dream that you've always dreamt of. So, I remember the series against Australia, I think similar that it would be in India, as this fierce rivalry against Australians.
Yeah.
But the time zone is always a big challenge in South Africa, as it would be in India. So growing up, it was always waking up early morning, putting a bed in front of the TV, a little mattress, and then just watching from 2 a.m. in the morning, watching the test.
And who would be on the bed with you? Do you remember?
I'd myself, I'd make
Just yourself?
make a little mattress there and just watch cricket. Obviously, when you get a little bit older into school, it'll be some sleepover where you wake up
Right.
and watch cricket with your mates. But there was this Australia versus South Africa thing. So fast forward into that moment, you in that moment, and I'm batting for X amount of time, and you get to a point where I was really cramping and really getting tired. And I mean, I've told this story a few times, but walking off at tea time on the 5th day, having batting for a long time, like walking into the dressing room, like having not much left in my tank, and AB, who we grew up together,
Yeah.
came to me and he said, like, keep going. You don't know how much this means for everyone out there, and those guys who's watching in the mornings. That was us,
Wow.
So I was like, from that moment, just put myself back then. I had this extra 100% back into the tank that was just filled back up to go back in there and bat for the last session without even remotely feeling like it was too much or too long or too tired. I could go for a lot longer that day.
Because you walked in and AB de Villiers was at the non-striker's end. And there's a part where the commentators go for 29.5 overs, there hasn't been a boundary hit, and you hit that first 4. Man, that is quite sort of game-changing. It must have really taken a lot of nerves off you, right?
Yeah, so I think right through both our careers, myself and AB are
Yeah.
very big team people, team-orientated, team-driven. So, obviously AB was exceptional talent. So the fact that he could always, when the team needed him to do those kind of blockathons, and there was a few occasions against India where we needed to do it as well. And that test match against Australia was obvious to see, like someone who can hit pretty much 4 every ball if he wants to.
Yeah.
Decided that he was going to block. So it was easy for me to just go, okay, what is my game plan for what I need to survive here?
Yeah.
And it was anything outside the stumps, I'm going to leave. If it's on my legs, I'll play straight in the V or I'll clip it. And if it's short, I'll pull because I didn't want to start fencing with my gloves. So
And the fielders would all close in.
all close, but I mean, it was nice. I loved every single minute of it because you were living this dream that you were watching for so long before, and so it was an epic test debut for me, and obviously a moment that has a really special place in my heart.
When a moment like this happens where you debut and you literally put your best foot forward, a lot of things change. Was that one of those moments that made you realize how good you were at the sport and how long and how far your career would be?
I think twofold. I mean, I was always better at white ball cricket
Right.
than with red ball cricket. The journey with white ball cricket was pretty much, I reckon, at the age of 21, I was ready to be thrown in the deep end if I had that opportunity, but I
Yeah.
didn't have that opportunity.
And by deep end we mean international cricket.
National side, yeah.
Yeah.
But red ball cricket, I was an unfinished product, and I went over to play county cricket for 2 or 3 years, which was really challenging because obviously the ball swings a lot there and the wickets are quite green, which taught me it was tough for me from a red ball perspective. It was tough for me to go through that, but it did grow my game. And same thing, white ball cricket. I just took off that side as well. I had a really good white ball campaign. But the thing with red ball cricket was always like I would get a great 40 and then get out, and then you get a couple of. But I was never a guy that consistently turned out hundreds or big scores, and that's what you need to do in red ball cricket. Like if you get a couple of 30s and 40s, and then you get a few good balls throughout the season. I mean, you're averaging 30, 35, which is not good enough to play at the highest level. So I went through that process. And then made my one-day debut for South Africa before, I think it was a year and a half or so, 2011. Yeah, it was my one-day debut against India. and also did well on that debut that day. But it was still this thing, there was this question mark about red ball cricket.
Right.
And I think because I started playing for South African white ball cricket, I gained a huge amount of confidence in I belong at the highest level. And that almost just filtered through to my red ball game as well. But I think more importantly, what they were looking at, because my numbers didn't necessarily justify then to get picked into the test team. But I think what they saw in me, they liked. I liked that I was this fighting.
The fire, the spirit, yeah.
They saw that there was character. And I think a big part of playing international cricket is that character, because it does become a little bit more mental than just talent. I mean, there's a lot of people that has talent that fades away.
Yeah.
So I think they spotted that and they're like, we need to fast track this. So they pulled me into the England series.
Yeah.
Which is when we became number one in the world, and I didn't play that test series. And then the next test series was Australia, and JP Duminy, which
injured, yeah.
Which is still, as of today, one of my closest and dearest friends. Like, I was there.
Was it bittersweet for you to kind of see him injured and then still go out there and play?
After the day, he just went and did his normal runs, and it was this gunshot almost from his Achilles snapping. And we were like, oh, wow, JP. And I didn't straight away. It's like, oh,
what do you do in a moment like that? Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, no, what's going on? And then like literally a split second later, you go, ugh. That means I'm in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's that shock first, and then it's right, okay, it's my time. So, I mean, obviously I was broken for him, but then it was, okay, I need to get ready for, which is going to be the second test in Adelaide.
It was incredible to see you lift your bat and celebrate that 100. And you can almost see it on TV, how much it meant to you. Because if I'm right, you also had a Kolpak contract that came to you where they asked you to move to England and play cricket there. But you turned it down and you said you'd continue to play for South Africa. How difficult was that decision?
Yeah, so that was a tricky time for me because I was a long way away from playing for South Africa. At least it feels like it, because you look at all the names that are playing in the team and you go, oh, they're going to play forever. They're just too good.
Yeah.
And then there's all these other guys that are just as good, and I'm still young. And like, so lucky to get an opportunity. I played club cricket up until I think 3 years after school every year, because I committed to this profession of playing cricket for a living, right? So I was like, 6 months of the year I'm going to go play in England. 6 months in the year I'll play in South Africa. And through getting an opportunity there in the Lancashire League, one of the guys got an opportunity for me to play in the second team, which is, second team cricket, which is also still count like first class cricket-ish. But I remember scoring 300s in a row and a 200.
Right.
So I scored 400s on the bounce, but one was a 200. And those guys were like, wow.
Blown. Yeah, we need this guy right now.
This guy. So
Lyman.
Knots offered me a 3-year Kolpak contract, but the fine print was that I would need to stay the days to, because they paid the fines for Kolpak players back then. So you need to do the days, which is 184 days a season there, and then I could go back and play for South Africa. But that meant I was only available for 2/3 of the season back in South Africa.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's half the year in one country and half in another.
Yeah, that wasn't going to be allowed. Well, it was going to be allowed if I wanted to, but they won't say, yes, you can do that and still play for the Titans. So at the time, I was earning, minimum wage is calling it, is over-exaggerating back then, because contracts then was extremely low. So I think it's about $2,000 a year.
Right.
That's what I was earning in my first year then.
And did they give you a place to stay?
No, this was now South Africa, right?
Okay, so this you had home.
I was at home, but the contract I got in England was £45,000.
It's a lot more.
So it's a lot more. And as a young kid, I was going, whoa, this is good money. Like, this is what I've been, this is what professional cricket is all about. The money did play a role in the decision making, but obviously from an action perspective, it wasn't what made me, because my desire to play for South Africa is just too big to give it up.
Right.
Like, I'm too young. I've gone through all the right channels, SN19, National Academy, captaincy, right through. It's going to come. I just don't know how long it's going to come. So I have to try. I can't give up before trying. But when you sign a Kolpak contract back then, you did sign you become a local in that country.
Right.
So you do.
You get like a PR, like a residency.
Yeah, so you do for that period say, I can't be selected for South Africa because I'm not a local in South Africa anymore. I'm actually a local. So I was like, okay, how long do I think before I can play for South Africa? Because this is a great stepping stone for me to get there, because red ball cricket, I need to improve. This is a great opportunity, and white ball cricket at different conditions against different players, with different players, living abroad would just be good for me. So I signed a 1-year deal with them.
Yeah.
I did the 1-year deal, and then they offered me, after that 1 year, they offered me a 3-year deal.
Right.
And then I said, we'll see how it goes, but I'll do another year. And that in that season, the Kolpak agreement changed with the Kolpak country. So then it was a case of, before it was, you didn't have to do anything. You could just come up and play as a Kolpak. Then they changed the rules to, you have to have played 15 one-day internationals or T20s, or I think it was 5 test matches.
Right.
So because I didn't do that then.
And this was on contract. It was on contract.
No. So this was the ECB brought in this rule.
Right.
So because they brought in this rule, I could no longer qualify to be a Kolpak player.
Right.
So basically the contract was then torn up, and I couldn't go play as a Kolpak anymore. But I mean, that worked out really well, because I think a year or so later, it's when I got selected for South Africa.
Tell us a little bit about your relationship with AB. What's it like?
We were rivals in primary school. He was based from his side of town, or another different town.
Yeah.
And then I was 13 years old, was the best side, so then we went to the same school, which is probably still today one of the best schools in South Africa.
Yeah.
Sporting schools. And we were like this super competitive personalities.
I can only imagine both of you going at it.
And like
relentless.
for the first time together, and we're like,
yeah.
So it was this very competitive relationship at first that grew into a friendship. And then AB's path was just so different to mine. AB was the best at, when the eyes of the right people's eyes were on him, he would just turn it up and be AB, like amazing. So he'd pull out this innings that everyone would just go, wow, this guy needs to play for South Africa,
like now. Yeah.
So at school, he was an exceptional sportsman and naturally gifted at everything. So he could do everything. And he actually jumped through hockey and rugby and cricket, and he was very good at everything.
Everything, yeah.
But then almost wasn't quite sure where he was going with which sport.
Yeah.
And I was so focused on cricket. So consistency in cricket became my thing, like cricket, consistent. And then AB almost he didn't really care. Like it was just I'm just going to go play cricket. I'm just going to have fun. But then when the national week at the end of the season, when we got picked out of all of the different schools as franchises to represent your age group, we go to a tournament against all the other states.
Yeah.
As would be in India. AB would turn it up to another level, and he'll just score 300s in 5 games, and it'll be like him playing against like little baby kids. Like he was just on a different planet. So he had this ability to just jump. And then after the tournament, he'll play against a senior provincial side as a 19-year-old.
Yeah.
And he'll just be like, I'm too good for you guys. And he'll dominate them. And it's like 6 weeks later, he'll get an opportunity to play for the SA side for the first team. And he'll just smoke 90 of like 60 balls. And so it was just like...
So he's always been ahead of the curve.
He was just shooting lights out, like well before his time.
Wow.
So my journey was the opposite of that. My journey was this long, almost like gravel road.
Yeah.
That takes time, that builds you, it breaks you. And so I had to initially deal with the thing of like being an AB shadow, which is I was always compared to him my whole career. Or every single interview was AB. But there was a point in my career where I was really okay with it. I became so, and I literally just I was like, guys, this is AB. This is not me. So don't put me in that same. I'll do it on my own speed or
Terms
or calling or whatever. It will take the time that it's going to. And it took me. I mean, it's everywhere. It was club cricket in England, and then county cricket there, and then it came back, and then it ended up being where I wanted to be. But yeah, AB we always remained really good friends throughout. He was touring the world. Every time he came back, we'd always spend as much time as possible together again. And then really great that there was an opportunity where that series against Australia, before my first test, he was the guy that was told to speak on. I mean, when someone gets their first cap, generally in the South African context, we give it to someone who knows him the best.
Right.
To introduce him to the squad and welcome him. So to have AB there to do that was very special.
It was very meaningful, yeah.
And I remember the the anthems. It was myself, AB and Jacques Rudolph. We all went to the same school. So we were like, this is pretty cool. I mean, there's not a lot of guys that can say.
That's some great alumni to have.
Three boys like in the same school.
Yeah.
Playing in the same team. Yeah, that was pretty special.
Before RCB, you were with CSK and you played with Dhoni there. That must have been quite interesting to be with someone who's, broadly known as this cool cucumber who doesn't succumb to pressure. And you seem a lot like that as well. Did you get along really well?
Yeah, I was very lucky. I think a part of my journey was I see batting and cricket as one side, but I've seen leadership as the other side. So I think confidence from a leadership point of view is it's probably something that sits easier with me than confidence sometimes as a player. So why I say I was lucky is that because I always had this leadership perspective of learning from great leaders. It was always something that I was fascinated about. So, when I initially came into the South African team and Graham Smith was captain, I really just looked with my eyes and stole with my ears as much as I could, because I was like, wow, this guy's got an amazing presence when he speaks. Like this big, like, lion roaring at you when he speaks, and he just dominated the room while speaking. So I was like, that's a leader, right? That's the way. And then you move across, and I get an opportunity to go to Chennai as a young-ish in my career, and I go, okay, Stephen Fleming. This is one of the great leaders within the game of obviously New Zealand cricket.
Yeah.
And there's this different aspect. There's this man-manager guy that just works on relationships. And I go, wow, that's impressive. That's impressive how he leads. And I remember my first season at CSK, I was just sitting next to him and just asking questions about captaincy and leadership, just to learn as much as I can. And then you put MS on top of that and you go, wow, this guy's just like tactically, how does he read the game like this?
Wow.
And you go, okay, this is impressive as a captain. And I think what was really good for me to go through was, even with all of that, going through it, the conviction of going, I'm not going to be Graham Smith as a captain. I'm not going to be Stephen Fleming as a captain. I'm not going to be MS Dhoni as a captain. In order for me to be true to who I am as a person, I need to be me.
Yeah.
Because if you're not being you, then people will see through it. Maybe not when you're doing well, but definitely when you are under pressure or underperforming, the real you will reveal itself. So I think I was lucky that by the time that I captained South Africa, I had this maturity and wisdom around that. Because I think that's what's the most important thing for any leader. It's just your best version of yourself. Of course, I used the example of Graham Smith and the way that he speaks in a dressing room.
Yeah.
But it's in my own style. It's in my calm way of speaking to people. His was like,
let's do this, boys.
The chest, it's this roaring voice. And the MS aspect of how good his instinct is on the field. Yes, you rely on things like that. But add that with me is I would be a lot more planning before the game. And then I add the instinct and the gut together within the match, what it's telling you. So you just take little bits of different people that I was lucky enough to learn from, and then you build your own style.
Faf, with this incredible journey that you've had, is there a book or is there a person that has influenced you and your career that you'd like to tell us about?
I'm not a big reader. I'm trying to read more, but the books that I enjoy the most are books that teach you, that talks about failure, overcoming failure, perspective in life, having the right outlook on what you go through. I think it just talks to me as a person, but also to everyone out there. Because life is hard, isn't it? It's filled with lots of ups and downs.
Yeah.
And the way that you respond to those downs, I think that those are the things that is interesting for me.
The work-life balance, how do you manage to maintain that?
Yeah, good. I think I'm really good with that. I think I see life as being really important to have balance in everything. So, whether it's friends outside of cricket, personal home time, hobbies. When I'm home, I'm home. I actually just spend time at my house with my family. I don't do much where people see me. I'm a very private person, actually, in that regard. I jump on my motorcycle and I go and just get away from it. So Cape Town is beautiful for that. So
Right.
these beautiful scenic drives. I go for a surf because surf is similar. It's just it's so beautiful. I mean, you've got mountain and sea and everything. I do that. I try to play a little bit of golf, but I'm not a great golfer. So I just mainly do it with some mates. But the surprising thing is I actually don't watch a lot of sport when I switch off because I want to recharge. And I know that if I watch cricket all the time, I won't fully recharge. So the balance of that, and obviously family takes first priority there. So when I'm at home and even on tour, I try and bring my family with me as much as possible to maintain that balance.
So far, we've had quite an incredible chat, and personally, it's been so amazing to get to know you and the character and where you come from and what's made you this person that you are. If I had to bring it down to kind of get one moment out of your life from you where you thought, man, this is where the switch is flipped and I am this man, what would that moment be?
I think as a cricketer, definitely the Test debut, because that told me that reaffirmed, is that the right word?
Reaffirmed, yeah.
You belong at this level. And it was like, this is where I want to be at this level. I think before that, especially all the stuff I've been talking to you about red ball cricket,
Yeah.
that was like, you belong here. So from that moment on, I was just like, okay, this is what I want to do. And yeah, I became super purpose-driven after that. I became the Proteas heartbeat, if I could say that. I lived and breathed everything cricket South Africa. And then now at this next chapter in my life, I found new purpose, and especially now with RCB, it's that you've got something that really lights the candle in your heart to go, okay, I've got purpose here. I want to do something special, and then that gives you a new sense of purpose, because I don't want to play just for the sake of playing. There's always something that drives me more than just the runs or whatever. This must be something behind it.
All right? May the fire keep burning, Faf. Thank you very much.
Thank you.